Number 1. Charles Manson. Charles Manson died alone in a hospital bed at 8:13 p.m. on November 19, 2017, his withered frame finally surrendering to the inevitable. 83 years was all it took for this monster to commit some of the worst crimes that even make seasoned psychopaths look like cute, innocent grade 1 chaps. The horror he unleashed in the summer of 1969 continues to haunt America nearly 6 decades later. August nights in Los Angeles should have meant parties and laughter. Instead, they brought carnage that redefined the word terror. Over 2 bloody nights, Manson's disciples carved their way through the Hollywood Hills, leaving 7 people dead and a nation traumatized. The Tate residence on Cielo Drive became a slaughterhouse. Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, begged for her unborn child's life. Her pleas fell on deaf ears. What federal agents and investigators discovered defied comprehension. 169 stab wounds, 7 gunshot wounds. Blood splattered across walls like abstract art painted in human suffering. The killers had written "pig" on the front door in Sharon's blood. At the LaBianca house the following night, they carved war into Leno LaBianca's stomach and left "helter-skelter" scrawled on the refrigerator door. Manson never held a knife that weekend, never pulled a trigger, yet he orchestrated every moment of savagery through psychological manipulation, so sophisticated it mesmerized seasoned prosecutors. The diminutive ex-convict had transformed lost young people into willing executioners. His weapon wasn't steel or gunpowder, it was a human mind twisted beyond recognition. The investigation exposed an underground world where reality had been warped beyond repair. Manson preached about an apocalyptic race war he named after a Beatles song. Helter Skelter would tear America apart, he promised his followers, and from the ashes would emerge their new world order. The murders were meant to spark this conflict, with Manson positioned as a prophetic leader who would rule the survivors. Prison became Manson's final stage. During 46 years behind bars at California's most secure facilities, he accumulated more fan mail than any inmate in American history. Hundreds of disciplinary violations filled his file. 22 parole hearings ended in denial. Each time, victims' families returned to ensure justice remained blind to his charismatic manipulation. His swastika tattoo became as recognizable as any corporate logo. Carved into his forehead during his 1970 trial, it declared his allegiance to chaos and hatred. Prison psychologists noted his remarkable ability to maintain influence even from solitary confinement. Letters poured in from admirers worldwide, drawn to mythology surrounding his name. When cardiac arrest finally claimed him at Kern County Hospital, respiratory failure and metastatic colon cancer had already ravaged his body. The cult leader who once commanded absolute loyalty from his followers died without a single visitor. No family members claimed his remains. The man who promised eternal significance became just another unclaimed corpse in a morgue drawer. Number 2. Theodore Robert Bundy. Theodore Robert Bundy possessed the kind of all-American good looks that opened doors and disarmed suspicions. Clean-shaven jaw, piercing blue eyes, a smile that could melt hearts and conceal unspeakable darkness. On January 24, 1989 at 7:16 a.m., Florida's electric chair silenced that smile forever. The monster hiding behind Bundy's charming facade had stalked college campuses across multiple states, leaving a trail of young women who simply vanished into thin air. His victims shared similar features: long dark hair parted in the middle, slender builds, trusting dispositions. They were daughters, sisters, future teachers, and lawyers whose dreams ended in unimaginable terror. Bundy's methodology revealed a predator of extraordinary cunning. Fake casts and slings created the illusion of vulnerability, making him appear harmless to potential victims. "Excuse me, could you help me carry these books to my car?" became a death sentence for at least 36 young women. His Volkswagen Beetle, painted a nondescript tan, became a mobile chamber of horrors. What separated Bundy from other killers was his ability to blend seamlessly into society. He worked at a suicide prevention hotline alongside future crime writer and Rule, who later described him as helpful and caring. He attended law school, dated a lovely woman for years, and maintained friendships with people who never suspected his nocturnal activities. This duality made him infinitely more dangerous than any obvious predator. The investigation spanning 7 states revealed Bundy's nomadic killing spree had no geographical boundaries. Washington State, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, California, Florida. Each jurisdiction harbored its own collection of missing women, whose cases remained cold until investigators began connecting the dots. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in a darkroom. His escapes from custody became legendary in law enforcement circles. First from the Pitkin County Courthouse in Colorado, where he literally jumped from a second-story window, then from a Glenwood Springs jail, where he crawled through a hole he'd carved in the ceiling. For 6 months, he disappeared completely, surfacing finally in Tallahassee, where his appetite for killing resumed with renewed ferocity. The Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University became his final hunting ground. In 15 minutes of pure savagery, he attacked 4 sleeping women, killing 2 and leaving the others permanently damaged. Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman died that night, their lives extinguished by a man who viewed human beings as objects for his pleasure. Prison interviews revealed Bundy's narcissistic core. He spoke about his crimes with clinical detachment, analyzing his techniques like a professor discussing case studies. Right before his execution, he confessed to over 30 murders, though investigators believe the actual number approached 100. His final words were directed at his attorney. "I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends." When 2,000 volts surged through his body that January morning, crowds outside Florida State Prison cheered and set off fireworks. The man who had terrorized an entire generation of young women became nothing more than a footnote in criminal justice history. His death provided closure for some families, while leaving others forever wondering if their missing daughters had fallen victim to his insatiable hunger for control. Number 3. John Wayne Gacy. Clowns are supposed to make children laugh, but not John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy dressed as Pogo the Clown for charity events and neighborhood parties, his painted smile hiding appetites that defied human comprehension. On May 10, 1994, at 12:58 a.m., he was executed by lethal injection at Stateville Correctional Center in Illinois for the torture and murder of 33 young men and boys. The suburban Chicago contractor appeared to embody the American dream. Successful businessman, Democratic precinct captain, respected member of his community who threw elaborate parties at his ranch house on Summerdale Avenue. Neighbors knew him as someone who got things done, whether organizing local events or managing construction projects throughout the city. Beneath his home lay a horror beyond imagination. 26 decomposing corpses were buried in the crawl space under his house. 4 more bodies were found on his property. 3 victims had been dumped in local rivers when burial space ran out. The stench of death had permeated the wooden floors above for years, masked by lime and perfume that Gacy sprayed throughout the house. His victims were predominantly young men between the ages of 15 and 21. Many were street hustlers or runaways whose disappearances went unnoticed by authorities initially. Others were construction workers who had answered job advertisements placed by Gacy's company. They arrived seeking employment and never returned home. The investigation began when 15-year-old Robert Pius disappeared after telling his mother he was going to see a contractor about a job. That contractor was John Wayne Gacy. When police obtained a search warrant for his property on December 13, 1978, the smell of decomposition led them directly to the crawl space. What they discovered their traumatized seasoned investigators. Bodies were stacked like cordwood in a confined space beneath the house. Some victims showed evidence of torture. Ligature marks around necks indicated strangulation. Many had been sexually assaulted before death. The methodical disposal suggested Gacy had refined his killing process over several years, treating murder like any other home improvement project. During his trial, defense attorneys argued that Gacy suffered from multiple personality disorder, claiming that an alternate personality named Jack had committed the murders while John remained unaware. Prosecutors demolished this theory by demonstrating the careful planning and concealment involved in each killing. Someone had to dig graves, dispose of evidence, and maintain the deception for years. Gacy showed no remorse throughout his incarceration. He painted hundreds of pictures from his cell, many featuring clowns and skulls that sold to collectors fascinated by murderabilia. His artwork generated thousands of dollars, money he used to fund his numerous appeals and maintain his lifestyle behind bars. His execution attracted protesters both supporting and opposing capital punishment. Gacy's last meal consisted of fried shrimp, Kentucky Fried Chicken, French fries, and strawberries. His final words were notably defiant. "Kiss my ass." When the lethal injection began flowing, Gacy's expression never changed. The man who had stolen 33 lives showed no emotion as his own was taken. The discovery at 8213 West Somerdale Avenue forever changed how law enforcement investigates serial killings. Gacy's case demonstrated that monsters don't always lurk in shadows. Sometimes they hide behind clown makeup and community service awards, preying on society's most vulnerable members while maintaining facades of respectability that fool everyone around them. Number 4. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. Patriots Day in Boston celebrates freedom and resilience. April 15, 2013, transformed that celebration into national tragedy when 2 bombs exploded near the finish line of the Boston Marathon, killing 3 people and injuring hundreds more. Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, 19 years old at the time, currently sits on federal death row at ADX Florence in Colorado for his role in America's most devastating domestic terrorism attack since September 11th. The Tsarnaev brothers seemed unlikely terrorists. Dzhokhar had been a popular student at Cambridge Ridge and Latin School, earning a scholarship to the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth. His older brother Tamerlan was a skilled boxer who had once harbored dreams of representing the United States in international competition. Their journey from immigrant success story to radicalized killers mystified everyone who knew them. 2 pressure cooker bombs packed with nails, ball bearings, and metal fragments turned Boston's most beloved sporting event into a war zone. The explosions occurred 13 seconds apart, maximizing casualties among spectators crowded near the finish line. 8-year-old Martin Richard died instantly. Crystal Campbell and Lindsay Liu were among those whose lives ended in moments of celebration turned to carnage. The investigation that followed demonstrated the FBI's capabilities in the digital age. Within hours, agents had collected thousands of photos and videos from spectators and security cameras. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed 2 young men carrying backpacks, their calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the chaos surrounding them. Their faces became the most wanted images in American law enforcement history. Their attempt to escape Boston triggered events that paralyzed the city for days. On April 18th, they killed MIT police officer Sean Collier during an attempted carjacking near the campus. Hours later, they engaged in a fierce gun battle with police in Watertown that left Tamerlan dead and Dzhokhar critically wounded. The manhunt that followed locked down the entire Boston metropolitan area while authorities searched house by house. Dzhokhar was discovered hiding in a boat parked in a residential backyard, bleeding from multiple gunshot wounds. He had written a confession on the interior walls, expressing no regret for the bombing and threatening future attacks against America. His capture brought relief to a terrorized city but raised disturbing questions about radicalization and homegrown terrorism. The trial revealed the extent of the brothers' planning. They had tested explosives in remote areas of New Hampshire months before the attack. Internet searches on Dzhokhar's computer showed repeated visits to jihadist websites and bomb-making instructions. The evidence painted a picture of deliberate radicalization rather than sudden impulse. Prosecutors presented victim impact testimony that filled the courtroom with tears. Survivors described losing limbs, enduring dozens of surgeries, and living with permanent disabilities. Families spoke about children who would never grow up and dreams that died on Boylston Street. The prosecution's case of the death penalty rested on the deliberate targeting of innocent civilians. His defense team argued that Dzhokhar had been manipulated by his older brother, who had become increasingly radicalized after failed boxing aspirations. They portrayed him as a confused teenager influenced by a domineering sibling rather than a committed terrorist. The jury rejected these arguments, finding him guilty on all 30 charges and recommending death. Currently 29 years old, Tsarnaev remains on federal death row while his case winds through the appeals process. He has shown no public remorse for his actions and rarely speaks during court appearances. The young man who once seemed destined for the American dream now faces execution for shattering the dreams of countless others in 15 seconds of unforgivable violence. Number 5. Dylann Roof. Church should be sanctuary. On June 17, 2015, the historic Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina, opened its doors for Wednesday evening Bible study. Among the faithful gathering that night was a slight, 21-year-old white man who had driven from Colombia with murder in his heart. Dylann Roof currently awaits execution on federal death row for killing 9 parishioners in what prosecutors call one of the most heinous hate crimes in American history. The massacre unfolded during the final moments of Bible study. Roof had sat quietly through most of the hour-long session, listening to discussions of scripture while calculating his attack. When the group bowed their heads in prayer, he drew a .45 caliber pistol and began firing methodically. His victims range in age from 26 to 87, all African Americans whose only crime was welcoming a stranger into their house of worship. Among the dead were Reverend Clementa Pinckney, a state senator and the church's pastor, along with Cynthia Hurd, Susie Jackson, Ethel Lance, DePayne Milton Dr., Tawanza Sanders, Daniel Simmons Sr., Sharonda Coleman Singleton, and Myra Thompson. Each had contributed meaningfully to their community. Each died because of the color of their skin and Roof's twisted belief in white supremacy. The investigation revealed Roof's systematic radicalization through internet propaganda. His computer contained manifestos praising apartheid-era South Africa and segregation-era America. He had posed for photographs while burning American flags and waving Confederate battle flags. These images, later posted on social media, provided prosecutors with clear evidence of his racist motivations. Surveillance footage from the church parking lot captured Roof's arrival and departure. Inside, he had briefly hesitated when congregation members showed him kindness, later telling investigators that their warmth almost changed his mind. But his commitment to sparking a race war ultimately overpowered any vestige of human decency. He left one survivor alive to tell his story. His escape lasted less than 14 hours. Police apprehended him during a traffic stop in North Carolina, where he calmly surrendered without resistance. During questioning, he expressed surprise that his actions had generated such controversy, apparently believing that other whites would applaud his attack. His disconnect from reality stunned even experienced FBI agents. The trial proceedings revealed Roof's complete lack of remorse. He dismissed his court-appointed attorneys and chose to represent himself during the penalty phase. His closing argument lasted less than 5 minutes and contained no apology to victims' families. He maintained that he was not sorry for his actions and would commit similar crimes if given the opportunity. Remarkably, many victims' families publicly forgave Roof during his bond hearing, demonstrating the Christian grace he had sought to destroy. Their responses to unimaginable loss provided a powerful counter-narrative to his message of hatred. Nadine Collier, daughter of 70-year-old victim Ethel Lance, told him directly, "I forgive you and have mercy on your soul." Federal prosecutors successfully argued that Roof's crimes met the criteria for capital punishment under hate crime statutes. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before recommending death, making him the first person sentenced to die for a federal hate crime. His conviction represented a significant milestone in civil rights prosecutions. Currently 29 years old, Roof remains in solitary confinement at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. He has filed numerous appeals challenging his conviction and sentence while maintaining his white supremacist beliefs. The young man who sought to ignite racial warfare instead united communities in grief and determination to overcome hatred with love. Number 6. Aileen Wuornos. Highways stretch endlessly through Florida, carrying travelers toward destinations they'll never reach. Aileen Carol Wuornos turned these roadways into hunting grounds, transforming herself from victim into predator across a killing spree that claimed 7 lives between 1989 and 1990. Wuornos, 46, was pronounced dead from lethal injection at 9:47 a.m. in Florida State Prison near Stark on October 9, 2002. Her childhood reads like a catalog of abuse and abandonment. Born in Rochester, Michigan, to teenage parents who couldn't care for themselves, let alone a child. Her father abandoned the family before her birth, later hanging himself in prison. Her mother fled, leaving Aileen and her brother with grandparents whose idea of discipline involved beatings and sexual violence. By age 11, she was trading sexual favors for cigarettes and beer. At 14, she became pregnant after rape by her grandfather's friend. The streets became her university, prostitution her curriculum. Years of working Florida's highways had hardened her into something dangerous. She possessed intimate knowledge of how men behaved when they thought no one was watching. This understanding would become her weapon of choice when desperation finally pushed her past the point of no return. Her first victim was Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old electronics store owner who picked her up on November 30th, 1989. She claimed he attempted to rape her, pulling a .22 caliber pistol and firing 3 times into his torso. His nude body was discovered in woodland near Daytona Beach, covered with a piece of carpet. The pattern had been established. 5 more men would die over the following months. David Spears, Charles Carskadden, Peter Seams, Troy Barres, and Walter Antonio. Each encounter followed similar circumstances. Middle-aged men seeking companionship from a roadside prostitute, unaware they were meeting death incarnate. She robbed them all, taking their vehicles, money, and personal belongings to fund her nomadic lifestyle. The investigation revealed a killer operating with growing confidence. Ballistics evidence linked the murders to the same weapon. Eyewitness accounts described a heavy-set blonde woman driving victims' cars after their disappearances. Composite sketches circulated throughout Florida, generating hundreds of tips that eventually led authorities to the ramshackle motel where she lived with her girlfriend, Tyria Moore. Her trial became a media spectacle, with Wuornos claiming self-defense against men who had attempted sexual assault. She insisted each killing was justified, portraying herself as a victim who had fought back against predatory behavior. However, evidence suggested robbery, not self-preservation, motivated most of the murders. Her changing stories and conflicting testimony undermined her credibility with jurors. The death penalty phase revealed a woman consumed by rage and mental instability. She dismissed her attorneys, representing herself and delivering incoherent rants about conspiracies and persecution. Her final statement embodied this disconnect from reality. "Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailed with the rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day with Jesus. June 6, like the movie. Big mothership and all, I'll be back, I'll be back." When the needles pierced her arms that October morning, she had been working as a prostitute along Florida's highways when she started her killing spree in 1989. Her transformation from survivor to executioner had taken 13 years to complete and mere minutes to end. The woman who claimed she was only defending herself became the first female serial killer to fit the FBI's behavioral profile, leaving behind a legacy written in blood across Florida's endless highways. Number 7. Dennis Lynn Rader. Suburban normalcy concealed America's most patient predator. Dennis Lynn Rader appeared to embody middle-class respectability in Wichita, Kansas. Church deacon, Boy Scout leader, compliance officer for the city. Behind his facade lurked BTK, bind, torture, kill. He stalked families for months, studying their routines, planning their deaths with the patience of craftsmen perfecting his art. His killing career spanned 3 decades, from 1974 to 1991. 10 victims died at his hands. Each death choreographed to satisfy fantasies he'd been nurturing since childhood. The Otero family became his first masterpiece on January 15, 1974. Joseph and Julia Otero, along with their 11-year-old daughter Josephine and 9-year-old son Joseph Jr., were discovered bound and strangled in their home. Police found 11-year-old Josephine hanging in the basement, her body positioned for Rader's gratification. What distinguished Rader from other killers was his compulsive need for recognition. He couldn't resist taunting law enforcement and media with letters describing his crimes in explicit detail. These communications revealed a mind obsessed with control and celebrity, desperate for acknowledgement of his work. He suggested his own moniker, signing correspondence as BTK and demanding media attention for his activities. His methodology demonstrated remarkable planning and patience. Rader would surveil potential victims for weeks, learning their schedules, mapping their homes, identifying vulnerabilities. He carried what he called his hit kit: ropes, duct tape, knives, and plastic bags in a bowling bag. His approach was always the same: gain entry through deception or force, bind the victims, then slowly torture them to death while photographing the process. The investigation consumed Wichita law enforcement for decades. BTK seemed to vanish completely between murders, blending seamlessly back into society. His letters provided tantalizing clues, but never enough for identification. Task forces formed and disbanded. Evidence accumulated, but led nowhere. The killer operated with complete impunity, striking when he chose, then disappearing until the urge returned. His downfall came from the same narcissism that had defined his crimes. After years of silence, Rader resumed communication with authorities in 2004, apparently jealous of media attention surrounding the Green River Killer. He sent packages containing victim photographs and personal items, along with detailed account of murders. His hunger for recognition had overwhelmed his survival instincts. The crucial mistake involved a computer disk he sent to a local television station. Digital forensics revealed metadata linking the disk to Christ Lutheran Church, where Rader served as president of the Congregation Council. Further analysis showed the document had been created by someone named Dennis. This digital fingerprint ended 31 years of investigation in a matter of days. When police arrested him outside his home on February 25, 2005, Rader seemed almost relieved. During interrogation, he provided detailed confessions to all 10 murders, describing his methods with clinical detachment. He spoke about his victims as objects rather than people, referring to his crimes as projects that had provided him with sexual satisfaction and personal fulfillment. His trial revealed the depth of his depravity through victim impact statements and crime scene evidence. Families described decades of terror, knowing their loved one's killer remained free. Rader showed no emotion during these testimonies, occasionally taking notes as if the proceedings were academic exercises. Judge Gregory Waller sentenced him to 10 consecutive life terms without possibility of parole. Currently 79 years old, Rader remains incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in Kansas. He continues writing letters to media outlets and researchers, still seeking the attention that ultimately destroyed him. The man who terrorized an entire city for 3 decades now spends his days in an 8x10 cell. His need for control reduced to regulating meal times and recreation hours. His legacy lives on in the families he shattered and the community he held hostage to his twisted fantasies. Number 8. Gary Leon Ridgway. Rivers keep their secrets until someone forces them to confess. The Green River in Washington state surrendered its mysteries gradually, yielding decomposed remains of young women who had simply disappeared from Seattle streets. Gary Leon Ridgway turned this waterway into his personal graveyard, disposing of victims with the methodical precision of a man cleaning house. His conviction for 49 murders makes him America's most prolific convicted serial killer. Ridgway's hunting ground was the Pacific Highway South, where vulnerable women worked as prostitutes or struggled with addiction. He understood their desperation, exploiting their need for money and transportation. His unassuming appearance, middle-aged, slight build, soft-spoken manner, made him seem harmless to women whose survival depended on reading dangerous men. This camouflage proved devastatingly effective across 2 decades of killing. His victims ranged in age from 15 to 38, predominantly sex workers and runaways whose disappearances went initially unnoticed by authorities. Ridgway selected them deliberately, knowing investigation into their deaths would receive minimal resources. He later admitted choosing prostitutes because he hated most of them and knew he could kill them without generating significant law enforcement response. The first 5 bodies were discovered in the Green River during the summer of 1982, giving the case its name and sparking one of the largest criminal investigations in American history. Task forces eventually swelled to include dozens of detectives working full-time on what became known as the Green River murders. Evidence accumulated slowly: witness statements, physical evidence, behavioral profiles. Yet the killer remained elusive. Ridgway's technique evolved over time as he learned from near captures and investigative pressure. Initially, he dumped bodies in or near the Green River. Later, he scattered remains across remote areas of King County, sometimes returning to move decomposed corpses when development threatened to expose them. He kept detailed mental records of burial sites, revisiting them periodically to ensure concealment remained intact. His personal life provided perfect cover for his nocturnal activities. Ridgway worked at Kenworth Truck Company for 32 years, maintaining steady employment and appearing to be a reliable worker. He married 3 times, with wives later describing him as a devoted husband who disappeared for hours without explanation. His religious conversion in the 1980s added another layer of respectability to his public persona. The investigation breakthrough came through DNA evidence linking Ridgway to 4 victims in 2001. Saliva samples collected during the initial investigation finally matched semen found on several bodies, thanks to advances in forensic technology. When detectives arrested him at work on November 30th, 2001, he appeared genuinely surprised that his 2-decade run had ended. His confession negotiations revealed the scope of his crimes and the calculating nature of his methods. In exchange for avoiding capital punishment, Ridgway agreed to provide detailed information about victim locations and his killing techniques. These sessions produced disturbing insights into his mindset. He described the murders as his career and expressed pride in his ability to evade capture for so long. During plea proceedings, Ridgway pleaded guilty to 48 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and 1 count of soliciting murder. He received 48 life sentences without possibility of parole, plus an additional life sentence. Victim families were allowed to address him directly during sentencing, with many expressing forgiveness, while others condemned his actions. Ridgway sat motionless throughout these statements, showing no visible emotion. Now 75 years old, Ridgway serves his sentences at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla. He continues providing information about unsolved cases in exchange for improved prison conditions, occasionally leading authorities to previously unknown burial sites. His cooperation has brought closure to some families while confirming suspicions that his actual victim count may exceed 50 women. The Green River runs clean now, but the memories of what it once carried continue flowing to the families and communities he forever changed.